The video you're about to watch is a preview from one of my fashion design courses available online at Fashion Premier Academy. Next, I'm going to show you how to draft a convertible collar. There's a few variations. This one is one example, and this particular one happens to have what is known as a stand. This piece right here is a stand, and then we have the collar attached to the stand. And as always, there's two pieces, is the inside and the outside, as well as two pieces to the collar. There's a top collar and an under collar. I'm going to show you how to do it in both ways, with the two-piece and all in one piece without the stand. I'm going to show you how to do both variations. If you notice, this piece right here that I'm referring to as the stand looks familiar, and that's because it looks just like the Mandarin collar that we drafted already. In fact, it's so similar that we're going to go back to our Mandarin collar and then create a collar to attach to the stand. Okay? Before we get to it, up until now, the collars that we've made so far, they come and meet at center front. In other words, they do not overlap. For the first time now, we're looking at a blouse, for example, that has buttons. So the two fronts overlap to create a button extension, so we can have buttons. So we'll talk about buttons and button extensions, which will affect our stand, our collar stand, and therefore the whole collar. Whenever you have a garment with buttons, you must have a button extension. The center of your button is center front. Remember, center front? So, this is my center front. The buttons are lining up with center front. Anything past center front is known as a button extension or buttonhole extension. And how do we know the size of the extension? The general rule in the industry is that the extension equals the size of the button. In other words, if I have a 1-inch button, I have a 1-inch extension. Also, whenever you have buttons in a closure, you also have a facing. This is a facing. I'm going to show you how to draft a facing. I've traced my front. Here's my center front. If I want to have buttons, I need a button extension. And let's just say that I have 1-inch button will give me a 1-inch extension. So I'm going to measure 1 inch. And this is my extension. My buttons theoretically would go right in the middle of center front. And this is my extension. After I've created my extension with the buttons and all that, I'm going to create a facing for the front, and obviously we're going to sew it to the front. So whenever we're sewing something, we need what? Seam allowance. We need seam allowance. So I've added a 1/4 inch seam allowance on the edge, 1/4 inch at the neckline, and 1/2 inch at the shoulder. I'm going to trace my front, and since the facing is only going to be in this section, this area right here, I don't have to trace the armhole and the side seam and all that. All I'm going to do is trace my shoulder, neckline, and center front. Okay, so since I've traced a pattern that has seam allowance already, therefore there is already seam allowance in this piece that I've just created, this facing. There's a 1/4 inch seam allowance here. There's a 1/4 inch around the neckline. There's a 1/2 inch at the shoulder. And using our hip curve, I'm going to create my facing, just like this. There is no set specific measurements. It could be 2 inches, 2.5, 3 inches. So you could measure maybe 2 inches or so. That's about 2 inches right there. And we'll do 3 inches at the waist. And that is our facing. To be continued in the next class. Thank you for watching this video. Check out all the courses available at Fashion Premier Academy by clicking the link below. And be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell next to it so that you will be notified when I post new videos, which is every week. I'll see you in class.